And that was Barry and Cynthia Blaze with Smile, and that is from their CD called Lost in Egypt. Barry and Cynthia, come over and join me. While they're doing that, this is their newest CD from Code of Ethics, and Barry's also released a single CD called Patiently Waiting. We'll be hearing a little bit more from that later, but just a little bit about Code of Ethics if you're not familiar with them. They launched in the early 90s, and they had Europop-inspired music, and now, actually, he's left in 2001. If you haven't heard them around lately and wondering what's happened to them, they've left and gone to be worship leaders at a North Florida church. We're going to hear a bit about that. Come on in. Yeah. That was wonderful. I'm a huge fan of happy music, I have to tell you. My friends, you know, they like that melancholy. It did make me smile. You know, they have that melancholy kind of sad music, but I think, like, when I listen to music, I think I have enough bad news around me. I want to be lifted up.
Absolutely.
Is that the idea behind that song?
Yeah, that's the idea behind that song. You know, for a while, I mean, and we're going to talk about this, you know, part of our testimony and part of our story. I mean, there was a lot of, you know, just heavy, a lot of emotions, a lot of heavy emotions, and so this song really was birthed out of, I just said to God, you know what, I just want to smile, you know, if not all day, then just a while, but, you know, just let me smile again. And so he gave me that peace and that joy, and
good for you to be able to write a song like that in the midst of heavy emotions, right? Because most musicians or artists in the middle of heavy emotions are writing the depressing stuff, right, that you cry to.
Yeah, and there were some songs like that. Those are there too. For
sure. Well, so you actually left touring, and I know you're living out of a suitcase for years to become a worship leader. What was that transition like? Because isn't that kind of performer and worshiper, is that two different roles?
Yes. It is, and it was strange at first. It's been the best life change for me. I think Cynthia and I enjoyed, you know, 11 years of touring, living out of a suitcase, like you said, you know, always leaving every week. And after a while, especially after we were married for probably about the 5th year, it was difficult. At that point, we weren't going out on the road at all together. She was at home. And it became really difficult for me to leave home. And so as I started to feel that, I knew it was time. After 11 years, I knew it was getting close to time to ask God, you know, okay, what's next? And so that was what I basically prayed, and God opened up a great door at a great church down in Jacksonville, Florida, which is my hometown. And so we moved back down there, been there for 8 years, and been part of a church there in Jacksonville, and have just been enjoying it so much. I love being a worship leader, and so now my new statement is I'll always have one foot in the church and one foot out the door a little bit, you know, just as an artist, because God has really showed me this year that, Barry, you're not just a worship leader, you know, I made you an artist, so you need to kind of balance that.
And what's that like, being a worship leader? Like, what did you have to do differently as an artist?
Being an artist, you're under a lot of, you know, honestly, you're under lights and bells and whistles, and it's, you know, a lot of fun. And so I wanted to be really cautious, really careful when I became a worship leader, that I just made sure that every action that I did, you know, all the praise and the worship, and it usually takes place on Sunday, making sure that all that glory goes to God. And so even though I did that on the road, it's more of a glitzy kind of, you know, just a real different vibe.
It's like a cool vibe in a sense, right?
Exactly.
But when you're trying to get everyone to focus on God, you don't want to be like all putting out the cool vibe.
Yeah.
I get that.
Exactly.
So here you are, you're doing something that's even more God-centered, you would think more pleasing to God, and you had a really traumatic event happen in your life. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, I always wanted to have a motorcycle. You know, living in Nashville, very hilly, and always touring, no real point in, you know, having a motorcycle there. So when we moved to Florida, that was one of the first purchases after about a year. You know, I told Cynthia, I said, I really want this, and I enjoyed it, and it was, you know, riding a motorcycle, I still think about it. I mean, it was a real pleasure, and people who do ride, they understand what I'm talking about, you know. It was great, and Cynthia understood, and she, you know, loved for me to just go out and have a ride, and it was my way of separating myself from the church and the ministry and the, you know, some of the responsibilities. It was my way of being able to kind of, you know, just ride out in the beauty of the warm weather and, you know, smell the beach, the ocean, right along the ocean. And so it relaxed me. I loved it. And so I was always worshiping, even when I was out on my bike. I'm just like, oh God, what a beautiful sunset, you know, what a beautiful day. And so I loved it. But there came a day when we were out with her parents, and we were about an hour away from Jacksonville, north at a beach, and we decided to head back home. And in Florida, it always rains right about 3 o'clock, and you know, in the summer you get this little brief shower, which is standard, no big deal. I'd ridden in the rain before, but that day proved to be different. And so the short story is I got out, they were in the van, they were in front of me about 4 or 5 car lengths maybe, and as we entered out onto this long bridge, it had started to cloud over, and as we entered out onto this long bridge, I really felt the Holy Spirit as loud and clear as he could telling me, you know, Barry, you need to get off your bike, you need to stop. And I didn't do that. I went right out onto the bridge. I saw lightning strike in front of me, and the winds were really heavy, and just what I didn't see from the road until I got out onto this bridge was that it opened up to the ocean, and just a massive storm was blowing in, you know, much bigger than
the edge of the storm, which is the strongest
the leading
winds.
edge, which is always the heaviest. And so the wind and the downpour and the rain and all, we're really not sure what happened, but if I hydroplaned or blown off my bike by the wind, we're not sure. But
and you don't remember very much about that?
I don't remember anything at the accident, and that's kind of where Cynthia does.
Yeah, because you were driving in a car right ahead of him, and you actually saw him fall off his bike.
We didn't. We were ahead. So when we got on the bridge, we saw how bad the storm was and that he shouldn't be driving in it, praying that he got off or before the bridge, not actually got on the bridge.
Yeah.
So we turned around, and when we turned around, that's when we saw him, and a bunch of cars had stopped, and we're trying to help him.
And what was that like for you? Was it a pretty bad scene?
You'd think it would be, but I just was very calm and peaceful. I didn't, I never felt right then that it was going to be bad. I just knew it was going to be okay.
And that was true, but you didn't know that he was going to have to go through a lot of surgeries. What happened to you, Barry?
Well, many, many miracles happened. I mean, first of all, on the bridge, I wasn't run over, which is a miracle because it was raining so hard. And the first person to stop was a fireman and
paramedic and a nurse.
Yeah,
wow.
And so they started administering first aid. They pulled me off the bike and started and really kept me alive.
Isn't that a picture that even when you don't listen to that little voice telling you know that God still has Plan B there for you? He's got.
And that came to me. You know, when I was in the hospital that night, I became conscious around midnight or so, and just briefly. And when I did, even through all the pain, and I had no idea what the extent of the head injury was, no idea at all, but when I became conscious for a little moment, I had peace, just incredible peace, that I knew that God was writing a new chapter in my life.